There are reports in some newspapers that there's been an increase in the number of complaints against the Constitutional Court judges in the past year. It is alleged that there has been an increase of 1,500% in misconduct accusations against Concourt justices. Now, to talk to me about this, I'm joined now by Judicial Service Commission spokesperson, Adv Dali Mpofu. Advocate, good evening, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Of course, the report from the JSC is not out. So these, at this particular point, are just mere reports that we are seeing on news publications. But the question is, if this were to indeed be true, what does this say about the feature of our judicial system, particularly when it comes to accountability, when you have at least 1,500% increase in complaints?
Thank you. Good evening, Chavo. Yes. Look, I think the starting point is to put these statistics in perspective. You know, when you say 1,500%, then obviously the public has cause to be alarmed. But if you look at the real numbers and the facts behind it, you'll realize that actually there's nothing, to write home about. This so-called 1,500% increase simply means that there are 15 more complaints than in the previous year, where there was one complaint. So, if you put it like that, then I think it becomes easier to digest rather than causing unnecessary alarm.
Yeah.
Having said that, obviously, the ideal situation would be for the complaints to be, even. The increase, in my view, if you look behind just the figures, is because some of the complaints that we were dealing with involved, for example, activities that were outside of the judiciary, which against people who happened to be members of the Constitutional Court. For example, two of those complaints were against Deputy Chief Justice Zondo, but not in his capacity as a judge, but in his capacity as the chair of the Zondo Commission. There were, of course, the well-known complaints against Chief Justice Mogoeng, which had to do with the Israel issue. But I can assure the public, Thabo, that of those 16 complaints, maybe only 2 or 3 were really processed.
Yeah.
How the system works is that frivolous complaints or complaints that don't meet the criteria are weeded out by the Judicial Conduct Committee even before they get referred to the person complained against. And the vast majority of these complaints fell into that category. In other words, they were dismissed out of hand.
Right. So while we're there, sorry, let me just come in. What must the complaint be concerned with for it to not be deemed frivolous and actually be given the kind of attention it needs to be given?
Right. Well, it's Section 14 of the JSC Act says that those which don't fall into the parameters which are set out there, or which are not lodged by means of an affidavit. And let me pause there to say that you may not know this, but in previous years it was possible simply to lodge a complaint against a judge. But that has since been amended, that the complaint has to be in affidavit form, and that actually helps to weed out unmeritorious complaints. And then also complaints that are solely dealing with judgments. For example, if Thabo Mtluli goes to court, is not happy with Judge X, and then lodges a complaint instead of an appeal, or does an appeal and a complaint against the judge, those kinds of complaints do not fall into the category. And then those that are otherwise frivolous within the general meaning of that word, or which are hypothetical. In other words, something that has not yet happened, or that one is speculating about. Yeah. So those are the broad categories here. But the point of the matter is that we do not discourage people from complaining. Actually, it's the exact opposite. The public should know that that avenue is available where there is a genuine complaint, the judiciary must be scrutinized like any other institution. This is, after all, a democracy. But as I say, there are systems that ensure that it's no cause for alarm.
Yeah.
Another statistic, Thabo, just to put the matter in perspective, is that there were a total of about 160 complaints, so 162 to be exact. And therefore, the 16 complaints against Constitutional Court judges, if looked into that perspective, don't even come up to 10%. It's just above 9%. So, it's not as if there's some particular problem in the Constitutional Court. There are complaints right through the system as it should be, and in the provincial divisions and in all other divisions.
Now, if you look at those number of events, those 16, the accountability system in place, does it have the capacity to consider and respond to that misconduct that is being raised there in the bench appropriately? I'll tell you what, there are a number of events, for example, the two that you mentioned that are quite prominent in the news, the Judge Zondo complaining about the commission and the Chief Justice Mogoeng. I mean, there's a lot of noise around them. Many are saying, well, this illustrates that the judicial accountability system in the country needs to be reimagined.
No, I would argue the exact opposite. I would say that, if it's possible, as it has been proven, to put a complaint against the highest judicial officer in the country in the name of the Chief Justice, and yet be able, through the system, to succeed. Remember, that is the person who presides over the judiciary. That I would argue is something that demonstrates that the system actually works. And that these matters are not swept under the carpet. And that would be the same with the Deputy Chief Justice, of course. Now, the reality of the matter is that the system is quite well regulated by means of the JSC Act. We have even the persons who sit are carefully chosen, who sit to sift those complaints. And as you know, for example, in the case of the Judge Shop case, which was another prominent case, it then went through the Judicial Conduct Committee that I have already mentioned, and went to the Judicial Conduct Tribunal, which was well televised and people saw it happening. And then it came back to the JSC itself. And now the next stage is that it's going to go to Parliament. So again, those three prominent examples would demonstrate that the system works even against senior judicial officers.
Yeah. As you're there, as you're explaining that particular process, the perception in some public eyes is that that particular process could possibly frustrate and undermine the judicial accountability system in the country, in a sense that judges, because of course of their knowledge of the law and their experience, are entitled to a process that includes unlimited steps and interlocutory privileges for judges at the public expense, something that a normal member of the public would not be privy to.
No, these are processes which in essence, if you want to simplify it, these are just disciplinary processes, which should be the same processes that any person would go through in the workplace and in various other institutions. I think the difference is, of course, that these are not persons that are complained against, who are there are people who are accountable to the public and the judicial officers themselves, and therefore the system has to be rigorous and foolproof. And if we think through experience, remember we are a very young democracy. So if we think that the system is too cumbersome, the tool is always there to amend the legislation. The example that I just gave, for example, was one such example where, because the complaints could be just written on a small piece of paper, you tended to have a proliferation of unmeritorious complaints. And therefore an amendment was made to say a complaint must be in affidavit form, and that was a positive development. So there's nothing in a democracy as young as ours that is, cast in stone. And I would think that if given our experiences, particularly with the short-term matter, the people have commented about the length of time that it has taken. Fair enough. Then maybe the legislators must relook the system so that there is prompt justice.
Yeah. And as far as the processes themselves, is the judicial accountability system able to insulate itself from being enmeshed in the political machinations of the country?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that, as I say, on paper the process is quite a commendable one, but of course, the reality on the ground is that judges do get entangled in political matters. So most of the time, undeservedly so. So if political players are unhappy about this or the other, they might politicize the atmosphere. And but even those political actors have to follow the process on the one hand. On the other hand, of course, the Judicial Service Commission itself, which is the ultimate arbiter, is made up of a mixture of judges, professional bodies, and politicians, and that is not by accident. It is the legislation provides exactly that politicians from different political parties proportionally are represented in the JSC. So it's, I suppose, it wouldn't be surprising if there's an element of politicization, as it were, of the process.
Yeah. I mean, in summary, all in all, in your view, having been in the process, the process is rigorous enough, it is transparent enough. There is no need to craft any new judicial complaint system in the country. It is fair. It is, maybe timely can be argued, but it is accessible.
Absolutely. It is fair. And as I say, it might be that there's justifiable criticism about it being cumbersome. But that is exactly because of what we're dealing with here. Judicial officers who are otherwise vulnerable, they are not able to defend themselves in the public domain. If Thabo Mdluli or myself comes up and makes a wild allegation against a judge, it's not as if they can just call a press conference and refute it. So those kinds of considerations are taken into account. Where there might be a legitimate cause for complaint, I think, is maybe we should communicate more the mechanisms so that it's not something that is not just known to lawyers, but ordinary members of the public should be able to literally just walk in and into some office and lay a complaint if they feel aggrieved. And so that maybe there should be more communication on our side in terms of opening up the process and not making it too legalistic or technical or unreachable.
I appreciate your time, Advocate. Thank you very much for joining us and making things a little bit clearer there. Yeah, certainly headlines could be misleading and lead you into thinking there's a huge problem that is going on there. That is Advocate Dali Mpofu speaking there on behalf of the JSE, ironing that one out and bringing some clarity to it.